I never expected to find love surrounded by rust and diesel fumes, but I guess that's how life works sometimes. The real moments, the ones that change everything, they don't wait for perfect timing or romantic settings. They just happen, usually when you're covered in grease and trying not to embarrass yourself in front of a crew of hardened shipyard workers. My name's Danny, and 6 months ago I was desperate. Fresh out of college with a liberal arts degree that turned out to be worth less than the paper it was printed on, I'd burned through my savings and was 2 weeks from being evicted. My dad had always said I should learn a trade, and I'd always rolled my eyes at him. Turns out he was right, but I wasn't about to admit that over the phone. Instead, I swallowed my pride and walked into Cascade Marine Services on a gray Monday morning, hoping they needed someone, anyone, even if I didn't know a wrench from a ratchet. The office was a converted shipping container with a space heater that rattled like it had a death wish. Behind a desk piled high with invoices and marine charts sat a woman named Rita, who looked like she'd heard every excuse in the book. I told her I was a hard worker, willing to learn, and desperate enough to show up on time every day. She studied me for a long moment, her eyes taking in my soft hands and my thrift store work boots that had never seen a real day's labor. Then she picked up her phone and called someone named Marcus. "Got a college boy here who says he wants to work," she said into the receiver. "Yeah, I know, but he's got something. Can't put my finger on it. You got room on a crew?" She listened, nodded, and hung up. "Be here tomorrow at 5:30 in the morning. Marcus Reeves is our best foreman. He'll either make you or break you. Don't be late." I wasn't late. I was 45 minutes early, standing in the parking lot as the sun barely touched the horizon, watching as pickup trucks and older sedans pulled in one by one. Men emerged, lunchboxes in hand, already looking tired before the day began. They moved with the kind of efficiency that comes from years of routine, not wasting a single motion as they headed toward the docks where massive ships sat waiting for repair. Then I saw him. Marcus Reeves stepped out of a black Ford that had seen better days, and something in my chest tightened in a way I wasn't prepared for. He was maybe 40, with broad shoulders that filled out his work jacket and dark skin that caught the early light. His hair was cut close, and he had these intense eyes that seemed to see everything at once. He carried himself with this quiet authority, the kind you can't fake, the kind that makes everyone around you straighten up a little without realizing it. He spotted me immediately. "You, Danny?" His voice was deep, textured like gravel and honey mixed together. "Yes, sir," I said, my voice cracking slightly. Real smooth. "Don't call me sir. I work for a living. It's Marcus." He looked me up and down, not in a judgmental way, more like he was assessing what he had to work with. "Rita says you've got no experience, but you want to learn. That true?" "Completely true. I'll do whatever you need. I just need a chance." Something flickered in his eyes, maybe respect, maybe amusement. "We'll see. Come on, try to keep up." That first day nearly killed me. We were working on a fishing trawler that needed its hull scraped and repainted, and I quickly learned that shipyard work wasn't just physically demanding, it was a completely different language. Marcus would call out for tools I'd never heard of, expect me to know port from starboard, and assume I understood what he meant when he said to check the scuppers. I fumbled constantly, asked too many questions, and by lunch I was certain he'd tell me not to come back. But he didn't. Instead, when the crew broke for lunch, he sat down next to me on a stack of pallets and unwrapped a sandwich. "You're trying," he said. "That counts for something. Most guys who show up here with your background, they think they're too good for this work. They last maybe 3 hours before they quit. You've made it past noon." "Barely," I admitted, looking at my hands, which were already blistering. He reached into his lunchbox and pulled out a small jar. "Here, my grandmother's recipe. Works better than anything you'll buy at the store." He handed me the jar of what looked like homemade salve. "Use it tonight. You'll thank me tomorrow." I took it, our fingers brushing briefly, and I felt this electric jolt run up my arm. I'd known I was gay since high school, had even dated a couple guys in college, but I'd never felt anything quite like this. It wasn't just attraction, though Marcus was definitely attractive. It was something deeper, something about the way he carried himself, the way he led his crew with respect rather than fear, the way he'd shown me kindness when he could have easily dismissed me. The weeks blurred together. Every morning at 5:30, I'd show up and Marcus would assign me to his crew. I learned to sand and paint, to use power tools without losing fingers, to read blueprints and understand the complex systems that kept ships running. But more than that, I learned about Marcus. I learned he was divorced, had a teenage daughter he saw every other weekend, loved old jazz music, and made the best coffee I'd ever tasted from a battered thermos he brought from home. I learned he was patient when teaching but had no tolerance for laziness. I learned he had this laugh, rare but genuine, that made his whole face transform. I learned he noticed everything, like when I'd skip breakfast because money was tight, and he'd suddenly have an extra sandwich he wasn't hungry enough to finish. I learned he was the kind of man who commanded respect, not through intimidation, but through competence and integrity. And I learned I was falling for him, hard and fast, in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. The problem was, I had no idea if Marcus was even into men. He never talked about dating, never mentioned anything about his personal life beyond his daughter. The shipyard wasn't exactly a progressive environment. Most of the guys were old school, and while nobody was outright hostile, I'd heard enough casual comments to know that coming out here wouldn't be simple. I kept my head down, did my work, and tried not to stare at Marcus when he'd roll up his sleeves to demonstrate something, the muscles in his forearms flexing as he worked. 3 months in, everything changed. We were working late on a container ship that had to be ready for departure by the weekend. The rest of the crew had left, but Marcus and I stayed to finish securing some panels we'd replaced. The sun had set, and the work lights cast everything in harsh shadows. I was exhausted, running on fumes, when I lost my footing on a ladder. I didn't fall far, maybe 6 feet, but I landed wrong on a stack of equipment. Pain exploded through my ankle, and I couldn't stop the cry that escaped my lips. Marcus was beside me in seconds, his hands on my shoulders, his face close to mine. "Don't move. Let me see." His fingers were gentle as they probed my ankle, checking for breaks. "Can you rotate it?" I tried and winced. "Yeah, I think it's just twisted." "Just twisted," he repeated, but there was something in his voice, an edge of fear that surprised me. "Danny, you could have broken your neck. You should have let me finish that. You're exhausted." "So are you," I shot back. "You've been here just as long as I have." "That's different." "How? Because you're the foreman? Because you're older? Because you think you have to do everything yourself?" We were staring at each other, faces inches apart, and suddenly the air between us felt charged with something I couldn't name. Marcus's eyes searched mine, and I saw the exact moment something shifted in them, when professional concern became something else entirely. "Because I can't watch you get hurt," he said quietly. "I can't, Danny. Do you understand what I'm saying?" My heart was hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Marcus, I know I shouldn't. You work for me. You're young enough to be, well, not my son, but definitely too young for me. I know all the reasons this is a bad idea. I've been listing them to myself for weeks now. But sitting here, seeing you hurt, even just a little, it made me realize I'm not going to be able to ignore this anymore." "Ignore what?" I needed to hear him say it. "The fact that somewhere along the way, teaching you to tell port from starboard and how to properly seal a hull, I started caring about you as more than just another crew member. The fact that I make extra coffee in the morning because I know you like the way I brew it. The fact that I requested you specifically for my crew after that first week because the shipyard doesn't feel right when you're not there." I reached up and put my hand on the side of his face, feeling the stubble there, the warmth of his skin. "I thought I was going crazy," I whispered. "I thought I was imagining things, seeing something that wasn't there." "You weren't imagining anything." He leaned into my touch, and the vulnerability in that simple gesture made my chest ache. "But Danny, we need to be smart about this. The yard, the guys, my position as foreman, your job. This could get complicated fast." "I don't care about complicated," I said, and I meant it. "Marcus, I've spent 3 months trying to ignore the fact that I'm falling for you, trying to tell myself it's just a crush, just admiration for someone who's been kind to me, but it's not. It's so much more than that. You make me want to be better, work harder, learn more. Not to impress you, but because you make me believe I'm capable of it." He closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, there was this mix of resignation and relief in them. We take this slow. We're careful. Nobody at the yard can know, at least not yet. I won't risk your job or your safety because I couldn't keep my feelings professional. Okay, I agreed. Slow and careful. I can do that. He smiled then, really smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Good. Now, let's get some ice on that ankle and get you home. Can you stand? He helped me up, his arms strong around my waist, and we made our way to his truck. The drive to my apartment was quiet, but not uncomfortable. When he pulled up outside my building, he turned to me. I meant what I said about being careful. But Danny, I also want you to know, this isn't casual for me. I don't do casual. If we're going to try this, I need you to understand that I'm all in. I'm too old for games. I'm all in too, I said. I know I'm young. I know I don't have a lot of experience with relationships, but I know what I feel. This is real for me. He reached over and squeezed my hand, just once, but the gesture felt like a promise. Get some rest. Ice that ankle. And Danny, use the salve. I laughed, despite myself. Yes, boss. Not your boss. Not anymore. Not when it's just us. The next few weeks were a study in restraint. At work, Marcus was all business, treating me exactly like any other crew member. But there were these small moments, these brief touches that lasted a fraction too long, these looks across the deck that said everything we couldn't say out loud. We started having coffee before the other crews arrived, sitting in his truck as the sun came up, talking about everything and nothing. I learned more about him in those quiet morning conversations than I'd learned in months of working together. He told me about his marriage, how it had ended not because of anger, but because they'd simply grown into different people. He told me about his daughter, Jasmine, who wanted to be a marine biologist and was the center of his world. He told me about growing up in a family where being gay wasn't discussed, wasn't even considered a possibility, and how he'd spent years trying to be what everyone expected before finally accepting himself in his mid-30s. I've dated a few men since the divorce, he admitted one morning. Nothing serious. I told myself I was protecting Jasmine, that I didn't want to introduce anyone into her life unless I was sure. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. It's easier to keep people at a distance. And now? I asked. Now I'm sitting in my truck at 5 a.m. with a guy who makes me want to stop protecting myself quite so much. He looked at me with those intense eyes. You scare me, Danny. The way I feel about you scares me. It's been a long time since I've wanted something this much. I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. You scare me too. You're this amazing man who has his life together, who knows who he is and what he wants. And I'm still figuring everything out. Sometimes I worry I'm going to disappoint you. You couldn't, he said simply. You show up every day and give everything you have. You're learning faster than anyone I've ever trained. You're kind to the other guys, even when they give you grief about being the new kid. You're exactly who you are, without apology. That's not disappointing, Danny. That's remarkable. We had our first real date 4 weeks after that night when I fell. Marcus took me to this small jazz club on the outskirts of the city, a place where nobody from the yard would see us, where we could just be two people enjoying music and each other's company. He wore a dark blue shirt that made his eyes even more striking, and I'd actually ironed my one decent button-down for the occasion. Watching him relax as the music played, seeing him tap his fingers against the table in time with the bass line, I fell even harder. This was Marcus without the weight of responsibility, without the need to be the foreman, the leader, the one everyone relied on. This was just Marcus, a man who loved jazz and had a smile that could light up a room when he let it. What are you thinking about? He asked, catching me staring. How lucky I am, I said honestly. 6 months ago, I was broke and desperate and had no idea what I was doing with my life. Now I have a job I'm actually good at. I'm learning skills that matter, and I'm sitting here with you. It feels like maybe everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to. He reached across the table and took my hand, right there in public, and my heart soared. I'm the lucky one. You walked into that office with Rita and somehow ended up changing everything. I'd gotten comfortable being alone, being just the foreman, just Jasmine's dad. You reminded me I could be more than that. That night, he kissed me for the first time, standing outside my apartment building under a streetlight that flickered like it was keeping time with my heartbeat. It was gentle and sweet and perfect, and when he pulled back, he was smiling. "I should go," he said, but he didn't move. "You should," I agreed, but I didn't let go of his jacket. "We have work in the morning." "We do." He kissed me again, deeper this time, and I felt it in every cell of my body. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "Slow and careful," he reminded me, but his voice was rough. "Slow and careful," I repeated, even though I wanted anything but. The shipyard became more than just a job after that. It became the place where I was building something real, both in terms of skills and in terms of my life. Marcus continued to push me, to teach me, to trust me with more responsibility. I made mistakes, sure, but I learned from them. The other guys on the crew started to accept me as one of them, not just the college kid who didn't know anything, but Danny, someone who pulled his weight and didn't complain. Marcus and I were careful, just like we'd promised. At work, we were professional, but after hours, we built something beautiful. We'd have dinner at his place or mine, cooking together and talking for hours. We'd go for drives along the coast, watching the same ships we worked on during the day sail out into the sunset. He introduced me to his daughter, casually at first, just as a friend, but Jasmine was smart. She figured it out before he told her, and when he finally sat her down to talk about us, she just smiled and said she'd been wondering when he'd finally admit he was happy. 8 months after I started at the shipyard, Marcus called me into his office. My stomach dropped, worried something was wrong, but he was smiling as he closed the door. "I talked to Rita and the operations manager," he said. "You've completed your probationary period and then some. Your work has been exceptional. They want to offer you a permanent position, full benefits, the whole package. And Danny, I recommended you for the advanced training program. If you're interested, you could start working toward becoming a foreman yourself." I stared at him, overwhelmed. "Marcus, I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Say you'll keep working here, keep building your skills. You have a real future in this industry if you want it. You're good at this, Danny. Really good." "I want it," I said. "All of it. The job, the training, the future." I paused. "And I want you. Not my foreman, not my boss. Just you, Marcus. The man who believed in me when I was desperate and didn't know anything. The man who taught me that hard work matters, that showing up matters, that being true to yourself matters." He came around the desk and pulled me into his arms, right there in the office, with its windows overlooking the shipyard. "You've got me," he said against my hair. "For as long as you want me, you've got me." "That's going to be a long time," I warned him. "Good," he said, and kissed me like he meant it. Standing there in that converted shipping container office, surrounded by the sounds of the shipyard, the clang of metal and the shouts of crews and the smell of salt water and diesel, I realized I'd found exactly what I'd been looking for. Not just a job, not just a career, but a home. A place where I belonged, and a man who saw me, really saw me, and loved what he found. The shipyard foreman had put me on his best crew, and in doing so, he'd given me everything I never knew I needed.